What is happening, superfans? You're listening to Behind the Mask, the show where we chat with your favorite superhero fiction authors about the worlds and heroes they are writing. Behind the Mask is brought to you in conjunction with the folks over at superherofiction.com. I'm your host, Franklin Kendrick, and today on the show, I'm pleased to be chatting with author Cece Ekeke. Welcome to the podcast.
How goes it? How's everyone?
Hopefully they're all doing good out there.
Nice.
So I'd start off with it can be the most difficult question, or it can be the easiest question. So when you're not a superhero typing behind the keyboard, who are you? What's your secret identity out in the real world?
Well, I can't give everything away, but I'd like to say I am a fan of pop culture and love traveling the world and just explore, just trying to find more, just find out more and whatnot, and just liking to kind of being a fan of other people's work as well. Because, that's the whole point of it, is like, okay, I write my stuff, but it's like, who else is really killing it out there? I love reading that.
Oh yeah, it's like we're all really like, first foremost, I feel like I'm a reader.
Yeah,
because that's what we all. Yeah, we all start. We all see something, and then we're inspired to go out and try to do it ourselves, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is like ultimately you have to be a fan of it. If you're not, then it's like, why are you doing it?
Yeah, I can't imagine doing it and being like, oh my gosh, I gotta like, you gotta know what you're doing. Otherwise, it's just like, oh man, no.
Yeah, you gotta be a fan. You gotta love it. And I mean, for me, of anything you write, you have to like what you write, because otherwise it's just it's cynical, because writing a book is a labor of love, and it is so key to really love. And you're not going to love it every day. There are going to be some days where it's just going to be like, oh God, why am I doing this? But it's just like, you have to have that core love, like you believe in your story and you get excited for where you're going to take your characters, where the plot's going to go. That's at the core of writing, regardless of, the level. Is like, there has to be something there. So.
Absolutely. So speaking of having it be a labor of love, what initially got you into writing, and then what specifically steered you towards writing superhero fiction?
So I'd say what got me into writing was, I used to sketch a lot, and I knew since I was a kid I wanted to be a storyteller. I just didn't think it was going to be writing. I didn't really have any interest or inclination towards that for years, and I didn't know, and I knew I wanted to kind of go into comic books like around high school, but then I was just like, I don't like drawing backgrounds. I don't like drawing noses. And yeah, I know. And also, what was the other thing? It was also, I didn't feel that I was measuring up, because mind you, when I grew up, these were like the days of like the Jim Lees, the Mark Silvestris, the Dale Quinons, the Jay Lees, if you will. And so I was just like, yeah, I can't measure up to those guys. I couldn't, those guys are amazing. And so then it was college where I was just flipping through some of my sketches, and it was of a previous series that it's still active. And it just kind of hit me, like, it was just like Wonderbot, like, I have to do something with these characters. Like, because there was a lot of sketches, and there was just a lot of these ideas that I'd come up with, and I was like, I have to do something with this. I have to write this down. And from there, I started writing. And of course, the first attempt to write was terrible. It was awful, because I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never written a book before. So I think a big inspiration, I mean, granted, she's become Voldemort herself, but a big inspiration for me to write and to get better is actually J.K. Rowling, believe it or not. This was before she was problematic, because this was years ago. This was like a year or two before the first movie came out. So I'd read Prisoner of Azkaban, and I was just like so floored by how, I mean, regardless of whatever people think of her personally, she's an amazing writer. And like, it was just I was so blown away by how she just put together the story, how she made me care about the characters. And mind you, I'd never read any of the books before, and this was the third book, and I was like hooked by the end of the book. I was like, I got to read all these, whatever this is. And from there, that made me want to be a better writer overall. So from there, it took me about 5 years to write the first book, as you know, for a lot of people. And each time got shorter and shorter and shorter. My last book, it took me like 3 months to write it, which for me was like super fast. It started from there. Started from sketching and a love of science fiction and a love of comic books. Yeah.
So I have a quick question about the writing process. Are you a plotter, or are you a seat of your pants, making up
pantser? A pantser. I'm not a pantser. I'm more of a pantser when it comes to short stories. Like if I do a short story just for the hell of it, and if I have an idea, then I'll try and work it out. I'm more of a plotter when it comes to my big books. But I'll tell you this. I plot it out. I know the general direction of things. However, I still leave wiggle room, because one of the most rewarding things about writing is when let's say you have something planned out, a plot or a direction you want to go in, and then you're in the weeds, you're writing that, and then your gut is just telling you, I need to go in this direction. I'm not feeling this anymore. This needs to happen. Or the characters decide to take over and decide to demand more attention. It's happened multiple times in my books where it's just like, oh, that did not go as planned. And it happens with the best possible way, where it's just like, oh, I need to go this direction. Oh, I'm going to do this. So yeah, I'm definitely generally a plotter. I'll have the foundation and the spine, because I always feel that's so important, especially when you have a series. Like knowing where things are going is very important in a series, just so a lot of the big things can land well. The small things in between, you can have a little fun with that.
Yeah, those are like the sprinkling of extra on the top. Like as long as your core is strong, everything else kind of like falls into place.
Exactly. As long as you kind of have the good story structure and you at least have a good spine of an outline, then filling the other stuff is a lot easier. So.
Turning the spotlight onto your book series, the Pantheon Saga. It is, I believe it's 5 books right now.
5 books and counting, and a novella.
5 books and counting. So it's still ongoing.
Yeah, it's ongoing. Definitely still going. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the series and who your heroes are?
Maybe. No, I'm just kidding. So for the Pantheon Saga, essentially, the series takes place in kind of like the present day, near future. And it's kind of like the initial inspiration to even write the series came from Astro City. I loved how it's kind of like you're seeing, how would a modern day real society react to superheroes? How would they integrate? How would they adapt? How would they be able to acclimate? And let's say you take that with, a dash of the MCU, because when I initially came up with this idea, I came up with the idea like 15 years ago, but I was still writing Star Brigade at this point, which was my first series of space opera. I was so excited about this idea that I was just like, I have to not think about this right now, because I have books I need to finish that I'm going to do here. So, but I'd say with the Pantheon Saga, it is essentially the story of 2 people who develop superpowers. You have the hero, you have the villain. And initially, the first book, you don't know who's going to be who. The person who initially looks like the hero is going to, oh, wait, he's doing something that's not good. And the person who, oh, he's not a villain, he's doing this. So you find out by book 2 who's the hero, who's the villain. That gets locked down. So they are going to be each other's greatest enemies. And so the first 4 books are kind of their origin stories. And I didn't just want to, because I know and there's nothing wrong with the usual approach where the hero kind of gets his stuff together, like he gets his crap together in one book and then he's a hero and whatnot. And then it's just kind of his adventures after that. It takes a while before these guys really kind of reach their finalish form. It takes till book 4, because they don't even have costumes. Well, kind of costumes. They don't really have costumes. They're still figuring stuff out. throughout the first 4 books. And even after they've kind of reached their finalist form in the next couple books, they still are kind of, there's still mistakes that are going to be made. Not everything's going to go smoothly. But yeah, so basically they don't really even know of each other's existence really until book 4. And the villain knows about the hero in book 4. The hero knows about the villain in book 5. So now the second half of the series, the back half, is going to be the collision, the confrontation. And that's the fun part. But it's also, aside from just their budding conflict, you see just the world around them, what's going on, what's the shift, what are the laws when it comes to different types, like just superhumans as a whole, but also superheroes, what kinds of superheroes there are. So you're going to have, of course, the corporate sponsored ones, the government saying, yeah, the corporate sponsored ones, those are real fun. Like there's a team that's kind of around called the Extreme Teens. And I put it like this: think about what would it have been if Disney, with Selena Gomez, Taylor Swift, because she started off as a Disney kid with Hollywood, whatever, which record she started with, Taylor Swift, Selena Gomez, Justin Bieber, the Jonas Brothers, but superheroes. How annoying would they be? They would annoy the crap out of you.
Yeah, they wouldn't be for everybody.
Oh my God. And then, of course, there's the government sanctioned teams. So then you have a team that's kind of like the Avengers / Justice League of this world. And they're called the Vanguard. And, and of course you see some pastiches of these superheroes. But the main hero, I don't want to give away too much, but I'll give away a little bit. But the main 2 characters who are in conflict, a kid named Hugo Malalo, and then another guy named Grayson Hirsch. So they're the ones who are going to be at odds. And that kind of central conflict between them, that idea came from Carnival.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because that was kind of the thing at Carnival where during the Dust Bowl, you had, I forgot the name of the actor, but it was the guy who was kind of like he could heal people with his touch, but he'd have to kill something. And then you had Clancy Brown, who's great in everything. He's like the voice of Lex Luthor, the voice of so many people. And he was kind of this crazy religious zealot. I think he might have had powers too. But you see them the first season and a half building their power bases at different ends of the country. And I was just like, oh, this is really cool. We should that would be kind of a cool thing to do. Unfortunately, the series got canceled before it could really flesh out and tell the story. But when I initially saw that idea, my first thought was like, that would be great for like a Superman movie, because they couldn't get a Superman movie right to save their own ass, pardon my French. So I was thinking to myself, what if you had a Superman movie where you did that with Lex and Superman, where while you're showing Superman's origin, you don't just show him getting brainwashed for 12 years by his daddy. No offense, I love the Christopher Reeve movie. That part always bothered me. But you show him I'd say you kind of base Superman's origin in this film, minus him being a vegan, you base this, or vegetarian or whatever, you base it on the Birthright comic book limited series, where he's traveling the world. He's kind of doing the Anderson Cooper thing when Anderson Cooper first started, where he's going to like the worst parts of the world, where there's all these conflicts. But he's doing that not just to tell the story, but you see why he would be able to get a job at such a prestigious place like the Daily Planet, because he went to college for journalism. He's traveling, he's submitting these articles. And so he's getting that credibility where it's like, okay, he can go to these places, and he's using that as an opportunity to hone his powers. Because I was thinking that, and then at the same time, you see Lex, he's in suicide slums. He, terrible childhood. He blows up the building, kills his father and mother, takes the insurance money, gets his first patent. And then little by little, you see him building it up, and you see eventually they're on a collision course, and that would be part of the film. And I think that would have been a fascinating thing, but of course that didn't go anywhere. So I'm just like, I'll just do it myself. And essentially that's the thing. The character of Hugo Malalo, he's basically, he's Asian Superboy, more or less, or Pacific Islander Superboy. So that's kind of how I'm doing this plot. And It's super fun because there was those two characters, and then in the first 4 books, there was also a third character who was not a superhuman. She was a human, and I thought she was super important, especially when you have these two characters who, even though they're superhumans, they're kind of outliers in the superhero, supervillain community. They're not really in yet because they're still during their origins. So the third character was a reporter who kind of had that in. She was kind of the audience's view into this superhero world where you saw stuff through her. Like you met the Vanguard through her. You met the extreme teams through her. You also meet the Batman of my world and his team through her as well. So, because there's also a mystery as well. There's a mystery that's driving the first 2 books.
The mysteries are like, I think they're like essential to.
Oh yeah.
You got to have something. You got to
have a drive.
Yeah, it's never as simple as just, well, there's a hero and villain. It's like there's always more stuff going on.
There's always going to be more, and there's the superhero fiction. It's such a fertile ground for that, such fertile ground, and that's why it was so important that I was like, okay, what else can we do that can really draw people in? And I thought it was important because this way you can see the flaws of the heroes, and this is not just not as extreme and nihilistic as The Boys is, but you can see don't get me wrong, I like The Boys, but I would never go that far because the heroes are basically the villains in that universe. So so but I definitely wanted to show that they're not these, even though they look like paragons of virtue on the outside, they're just screwed up human beings who are dealing with an immense amount of pressure. But and this was another aspect I loved from Ultimates. The Ultimates comic book. You see where I'm going with this. I loved how they made them celebrities. I loved that. I thought that was because it makes perfect sense. Like in a real world, superheroes would be celebrities, and some of them would kind of take advantage of that. So, and you just see how the world is changed by it. Like in book 5, and I really love doing this. There was a string of nightclubs that are kind of like the Planet Hollywoods of the superhero world. And they're basically named after kind of famous things in the comics. Like the one place that is in the main city in the world, it's called Danger Room.
Okay.
Yeah. It's Danger Room. Or you have a place, and there's a place in Manhattan called HQ.
Okay. Yes.
So you have some fun with it, It's just like, and I think it's so important when you're doing a superhero world is that you have some seriousness, you have some groundedness to it, but you have fun.
Yes.
You don't make fun. You can kind of turn certain things on their head, but it's like you have fun because if you're having fun writing it and it's a good story, the reader's going to have fun.
Oh yeah, and that's why we go back and reread, and watch over and over like some of the great heroes. So, yeah, I gotta say, for personally, that one, that was like my gateway into Marvel Comics. Like I I knew who Spider-Man was, and I had seen like the movie and with some friends and like all the like the kid stuff when I was really young. But I went to like when Borders was a thing.
Oh wow.
I was like, oh, so that Spider-Man movie was really good. I wonder what else there is from these things. So it was like, okay, besides my uncle's old box of like really old like Stan Lee era, I saw the Ultimates Volume 1 trade paperback and was like, what's this? And so that was like the first time I ever knew who like Iron Man was.
Wow, like, what?
Yeah. And so it was just like from there, it like branched out into like, oh, and they all have their own stories and everything. So it was kind of like the perfect. So whenever through the years they were like, yeah, maybe we'll do a movie of one of them, I was always imagining like that version of them, and I never imagined anybody other than Samuel L. Jackson.
So you didn't get into the 616. Interesting. Okay.
No, all that stuff I went back. Like it was like I was glad to be able to go back and be like, there's so much that I don't know about, but that was like making it. It went from that point on. It went from being like the kind of like, oh, it's the like sort of semi-cheesy old artwork to like, wow, this is like a blockbuster in a book.
Yeah. So for me, it was an interesting time for me to get into comic books. I get into comic books around the early 90s, and that was an interesting shift. That was a really interesting time in comics. Like, I know there are a lot of people who are kind of like 80s fans or just like, oh, the 90s sucked. I'm like, dude, the 90s were awesome. I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect. You know, like there was maximum carnage and maximum clonage. But you also had, I mean, that was like, when you think about it, the X-Men were awesome at that point. Like the X-Men were great. You had the gold team, you had the blue team. For me, I got in, it was my 7th grade, and I found a beat up copy of X-Men Volume 2, number 15, in my middle school auditorium. And I was familiar-ish with X-Men at this point. I knew there were a lot of toys around them. And I knew who Spider-Man was. I watched Spider-Man and Their Amazing Friends when I was a kid. So it's like I was very, on a very, surface level, I was familiar with comics. But that right there really got me hooked in, because that was in the middle of the Executioner's song. So that was the one where Cable got framed for shooting Professor X with a bullet that gave him a techno-organic virus. But it was actually, of course, Cable's clone, Strife, who had kidnapped Jean, playing everyone, trying to release the legacy virus. And so I kind of went back and started reading all this, and I started getting all this information, just kind of like, let me get all these back issues, get all this information. So for me, X-Men was mainly, like, that was my favorite. Like, I read X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, X-Force, when it was still good at that point, X-Factor. And it was the version of X-Factor that was led by Cyclops' brother, Havoc. So it was like Havoc, Polaris, Strong Guy, Wolfsbane, Multiple Man, and Quicksilver occasionally. And I never got into Excalibur. I never did. But no, and I loved it when back then crossovers meant something.
Yes.
Like, and they weren't like,
for sure.
And they weren't like 5 a year. So it's just like,
there was a time. There was, like, it's hard to remember, but like there really was a time where it was like, okay, this is actually like a gigantic event that will ripple through everything, and it's not going to
actually ripple things, and actual ripple through things. And that was the thing with the Executioner song, is that they could do those things where you could have all that happen in these X titles, and it wasn't like they do these, rip off miniseries just so they could get extra money. Or you didn't have these people doing all these things at the same time. It was like, no, this is just focus on this. This is happening. There are actual changes that come out of this. Because after the Executioner song, Cable died temporarily, but he'd come back. He'd get better. And then you had the legacy virus, which ripped through the mutant population. That was really important. That was super key. And but yeah, like I miss those types of crossovers where stuff really mattered and changes really, at least for the time being, stuck.
Yeah, it's such a weird era to be living in now, because I feel like these companies that own these characters, like the big characters, like there's no way they're ever gonna get rid of them, because that's what but that means you can't shock us by killing off somebody. You have to shock us with like an amazing story that puts them through the ringer, and then they come out a little bit different.
And they'll be, they'll just walk it off. They'll get better.
Yeah.
And the thing too, it's funny you said that. You actually hit the nail on the head, because when I was getting into comics, aside from that being when artwork started to really be like a big deal, like artwork was great. I mean, artwork was solid before, but again, this was the era of like the Jim Lees.
I'm not like legends.
Yeah, these legends who were just fantastic. Like, I remember just seeing Jim Lee's artwork, and I was like, oh my God, like he's my favorite comic artist of all time. He'll always be my favorite comic artist. And then I think from there, what also got me into Superman, because I always kind of liked Superman, but Superman's probably one of my favorite comic characters, partly because I got into him because it was the Death of Superman story when I was like in 7th grade. And I remember a friend just kind of had he literally had like a spare, like 3rd print copy of like the actual issue where he died. It was Superman 75. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I read it. I was like, this is awesome. So I went back and I like bought the paperback trade. And then I bought Funeral. I think I bought Funeral for a Friend, but I did buy The Return. And I thought that was awesome because they had like 4 different Supermans and none of them were him. But yeah, that's what got me into that character. And I always loved the origin. I loved the more alien side when they kind of explored that more stuff, when you do stuff in space. I always thought that was cool. And yeah, Superman, Superboy, all that was kind of that was where the interest to create my own kind of Superman, Superboy type character came to be. But making him a little more vulnerable, like he's not as invulnerable as Superman, like he can get hurt, but not by everyone, but just, I think it's important to show. And I think with those type of characters, given how powerful they are, you need to really show it's more of a psychological and emotional thing that you really need to do. And that's kind of what I've learned to do with this character is how do you put him through the ringer? And of course, when you have that much power, it's like the world is like literally a tissue box around you. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. How
do you work at that? Like even that there's this novella I'm writing right now where this is why I'm laughing, where he's visiting a friend who lives in like another state, and out of context, I can say this because it's out of context. He, has an intimate encounter with said friend, and he's actually really grateful to her because he's just like, wow, this is like the first time I don't really have to hold back that much. Mm-hmm. So, and this, mind you, this is a teenager, so it's like, this is a big deal. And he's like training right now, but it's just like any girl he has to be with, it's like, you gotta be very, very careful because it's like, the obvious reasons. Yeah. There might be kids watching, so I'll be mindful. But you just have to be so careful. And so it's just little moments like that where it's just like, oh. Or even a thing is where he's kind of like, since he can kind of run pretty fast, he takes time to stop off at like, say, like someplace like in southern Utah, because there's like no shortage of amazing geological formations in that part of the country. And he's just taking it in and just enjoying it. And he's enjoying it in a way that most people can't. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of cool to kind of have him kind of really experience these things. And then, of course, at this point in the story, in the novella, he can't fly yet. He's still learning. He doesn't quite know how to do it. He'll learn. He won't take as long as Clark Kent in Smallville. Don't worry. But
I like that. Oh, God, that's my jam.
Yeah, but he took like 10 years to learn how to fly when every Kryptonian who got powers like could fly immediately. That was bothersome. Yeah. But basically, he's like on this rock formation that he jumped on, and it's kind of like the cat that gets stuck in the tree. It's just like, okay, crap, how do I get down?
Oh yeah,
I got up here. How do I get down? He does get down. He just makes a lot of noise. But yeah, it's again having fun with these stories and just really enjoying them. And comics were that avenue. And you're absolutely right when you said that money now has played a problem because you can't shock people anymore because they're not going to get rid of them, or they're not going to get rid of them for long. Mm-hmm. And it's what happened when it's funny. I was talking with some friends about it, where what ended up happening with like the legacy characters for Marvel, where they replaced Iron Man, Thor, and then Captain America. And
oh yeah, I remember that. It was so weird.
It was dumb. It was bad. Like, and it's the thing is like, if you can't create new characters who can sell, then maybe you want to rethink your strategy. What are you doing wrong?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a rabbit hole to go down. But I will say. I mean, they have such a universe pre-built for them. It shouldn't be that difficult to make new characters living within.
Or new characters who are like main eventers.
Yeah. I mean, you could just, when you add up all the comics for each character put together, I mean, they've lived like lifetimes.
It's like the Simpsons. They never age.
Yeah, they don't age. They're the same always. But I mean, for my frustration with the whole like trying to shock with killing off or getting rid of and replacing and then bringing back is it just turns into like disappointment and then being frustrated that, oh great, I just don't have the characters that I like for like 5 months while they're retooled or whatever. And it's like you could just not do the 5 months and just continue giving me more Wolverine or whoever.
And you know what though? Like I remember when they had Dick Grayson replace Bruce.
Yeah.
I thought I would have been fine with that being a permanent thing, honestly. It makes sense.
I had friends that were very disappointed when it like all gets reversed again, and they're like, "No, stay."
It's like, and this is the problem. They did this all the time. They did this when Bucky took over as Captain America. Mm-hmm. They did this when Dick took over as Batman, and those were actually two of the more celebrated changes. Mm-hmm. And they kept reminding you, "Hey, this ain't Steve," or "Hey, this ain't Bruce." And people really like the dynamic between Damian and Dick. Mm-hmm. You know, they love that kind of like, okay, he's kind of the happy, joy one, and Robin is the one who's kind of brooding and dark. And then when they just had Bruce and Damian together, I was like, it's like the same person, just one's more murdery.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see how long it is before they bring Alfred back. I'm sure they will.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, because I guess there was Bane. He took over the city, and honestly, after a while, Gotham. What's the point of trying to save Gotham anymore? You know. Yeah. And speaking of Batman, so there's a character, my Batman pastiche. He was born. Obviously, he was inspired by Batman, Daredevil, Rorschach, even. But one of the biggest things about his ideology, his dogma, was inspired because a friend of mine, who's a way bigger comic nerd than I am. He, like years ago, posted a Facebook rant about why Batman sucks and is ineffective. And I cannot unsee it because there was so much truth. I was just like, oh, he's right. Because he's just like, Batman just plays, with all his money, he plays dress up and punches people. And all these people get out. Because, and I remember one time I think it was the miniseries called Death of the Family. It was where Joker like skinned his face off and then sewed it back on, which okay. And then he was terrorizing or holding another hostage, like a bridge hostage. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking like Scott Evil from Austin Powers. I'm just like, just shoot him. Just shoot him.
Yeah, please.
Like, it's at a point, it's at a point now where it's like, this person is beyond redemption. How many times have you jailed him? Mm-hmm. It's like, how many people has he killed? It's time to kill him. This is like not even funny anymore. Literally, it's not even funny. I'm just like, just kill the character off. Like, I know he's Batman's greatest nemesis, but it's just like, this is beyond ridiculous.
Yeah, it's time. It's another like flip side of the coin where it's the same thing for heroes. I mean, you can only do the same thing with your villains so many times before it's tired. And even in like Marvel comics, sometimes they make cool villains and then just kill them because they don't want to continue. And I'm like, no. Like when they made Dark Wolverine, and it was like it was like Wolverine's son.
Oh yes, Deken.
Yeah,
Deacon or Deken. There's two actually people called Deken in the Marvel.
Yeah, like I followed him for his whole run until they were like, okay, and now he's gone, and I was like, no.
Yeah, Wolverine put him up with a Murashava sword or something.
Yeah, it was so. But they did eventually bring him back again, but it's not the same. It's not the same as the one that I loved and knew and didn't trust but wanted to love. Like,
because he was screwing with a lot of people on his team because he was in the Dark Avengers, and and he was screwing with Bullseye. He was like screwing with him because he also has that pheromone control. Like he was like,
they did all the weird like serum drug stuff where the art changes to show like what it looks like to him when he's like on the crazy enhancement drugs, and then he doesn't know what he did. It's like, this is so interesting to me. I was all in. But
and I think it's like when you do stuff like that, that was during Dark Reign. That's right. Yeah, and that was actually a really interesting story. Like, what if you have these Dark Avengers who are kind of like, they've taken, because I forgot where the Avengers were at this point. Like, there had been so many. It's like there had been so many crossovers. I couldn't tell you which one. Like, had come. I think I think Access had come before that, and
Mm-hmm.
Access was the one. I love even explaining this to people because it breaks people's brains. So this is the one where I think Charles Xavier had been killed in. They did another Phoenix resurgence where it was that's right. It was X-Men versus Avengers, and so Avengers, and then 5 of the Avengers. It was Cyclops, Colossus, Namor, Emma Frost, and God, who else? It was someone else. I forgot who. There was a 5th person, but either way, all of them basically got a sliver of the Phoenix Force because the Avengers were trying to destroy it before it came back and took another host,
Mm-hmm.
and they were going after Hope Summers, who is Cable's adopted daughter. And so then the Avengers and X-Men were fighting, and this began that stupid trend of, oh yeah, let's have all the heroes fight each other because it sells or something. And those actually, that was after Civil War. Yeah, that's right. So so then what happened is that Xavier ended up getting killed. Actually, no, let me just, because this is gonna bother me until I find this out. Hold on a quick second. Phoenix 5. Oh, that's right, Ileana. Okay. So Ileana was the 5th person. She was the 5th member of the Phoenix 5. That's Cyclops. That's Colossus's sister. So so what happened is that then Tony Stark built this thing to try and destroy the Phoenix Force, which it's a cosmic force. You're not going to do it. And so it ended up splitting into 5, and then it went into those 5 aforementioned people. And so they became really powerful. And then it was like when one of them lost their force, it kind of went into the other 4 and they got more powerful. And then it ended up that it was just Cyclops and Emma Frost, and they were dating at this point. And then Cyclops betrayed her, stole the Phoenix Force from her, going to be awkward afterwards. And Charles Xavier tried to talk to him, and then he killed Charles Xavier. And so then after that, this leads us to Access. So Access, the clone of Red Skull, desecrates Charles Xavier's body and steals some of his brain matter, grafts it to his own to get telepathic powers, and then broadcasts nonstop hate all over the world using Charles Xavier's powers that he stole. Exactly. Even people who are like comic fans are just like, so yeah, and that that led to whatever happened. I think Access then led to Dark Reign. Mm-hmm. And I forgot where the Avengers were. I don't know. They got scattered or something.
Some of them got teleported out. Like I think like Thor went back to Asgard to try to do something. So he was gone. Hulk was gone on like Planet Hulk. Right.
He was. Yes. He was gone on Planet Hulk. Yes.
Yeah. There were other ones. There were other ones where it was just like,
because he had Dark X-Men and then he had Dark Avengers. And Norman Osborn was kind of the Iron Patriot, kind of replacing Tony Stark in that degree. Yeah, and Hammer had replaced S.H.I.E.L.D. because S.H.I.E.L.D. had been compromised. I forgot by who. It was another crossover. I don't know which one.
Oh boy, there's been so many now.
You see, and they all lose efficacy because there's been so many. So what I wanted to do with this, like going back to my story, I should probably just talk about the story. You just talk about comics forever. So I wanted to take some of the best qualities of the comic books that I grew up loving and some that came before me and really make it where it's like, what happens in a world where superhumans are around? What are the laws that need to come into effect? What is the agencies that polices them? And of course, what about the superheroes? And what will they be doing? And let's navigate and go through the career of this young superhero and the supervillain as they go through their respective journeys, build up their names, build up their cred, and then eventually come to a collision course. And so that's like in book 5, like by the end of book 5, it's like, okay, this is going to happen in book 6. They will fight in book 6. It will not be over in book 6. This is going to go on for a bit because you don't want to just one and done. It's like there's other villains, other obstacles. And there is another villain that was hinted at the end of book 5, which I can't wait to write for that character. But what I ended up doing actually was some of the novellas that I've been writing, like the first novella I wrote actually takes place during book 2. I just kind of yada over it towards the end because it's a big enough story where it's just like I can't just put that in. That's going to take up more space. So and it would completely veer the story off course where it needs to go. So I just made it its own novella, and then this novella, it takes place like a couple weeks before book 3.
Okay, so they're kind of like back to back.
Yeah, they're kind of like companion. Yeah, they're kind of like companion pieces. You don't need to read them, but they do kind of help flesh out some stuff. And the cool thing about these first 2 novellas is it's allowed me to kind of introduce other ethereal elements to the Pantheon Saga. Because in the books, you really mainly see mostly superhero stuff, like superhumans. But these novellas, you can see more of the supernatural. And that's been super fun. And it's kind of like, hey, this stuff does actually exist. It's kind of like we're not ignoring it, but this is kind of our way of bringing it in, so it's not completely intrusive and throws everything off track. Mm-hmm. So, like, because I think the villain in this one I'm writing right now, it was a Wendigo.
Oh, okay.
Which, by the way,
creepy.
The initial idea I got from that was the very, very first X-Men arcade game where like 4 people could play. One of the bosses was the Wendigo that first fought Wolverine and the Hulk, where Wolverine debuted. Mine looks nothing like that. It looks like the terrifying, decomposed, insatiable Wendigo of Native American lore. Yeah. So, and it was fun writing this character, like, because he's a very underrated. It's a very underrated supernatural creature, and I think he deserves more love.
Mm-hmm. And it's also like very mysterious because I mean it's like how much do you really know about it? So it could be there's tons of things.
Yeah, well, no one even really knows what it is until like halfway through the novella, because even when people describe it, no one knows what the hell it is. It's like, what the hell is that? Because I have kind of 1 or 2 showings where you show what this thing can do. You show just a fraction of what it can do and how it can kill and just mimic and just trick, and how it stinks, and I'm joined with the Wendigo, and because there's a couple different iterations on how it can look, but for me, the one that really stuck with me visually, and I made sure to describe that, it's the one that is just gray skin. It's like 10 to 15 feet tall, grayish skin stretched over bony mass with some fur, a deer skull as the head, with the antlers intact, and just burning red eyes, and needle-like teeth, claws, and insatiable hunger, usually devours its prey. And to draw people in, it can mimic voices. That's one of its powers. It can affect weather. And it can possess people. So I was like, this is a really freaking cool creature for us to go in. And so this allowed me to kind of do some cool stuff where, I like urban fantasy. I've always kind of been a sucker for like vampire and werewolf stories. I've always dug those. So this allows me to kind of do my spin on the werewolf lore and some vampire stuff. Like even just like, okay, how do werewolves control their shifts? And there's an answer for that as to what they do, what they need to do. And what's the origin of werewolves, at least werewolves in North America? There's an answer for that too. There's an answer for that as well. So it's super fun doing that world building, because I remember one time I was doing like a writing sprint and I was just like, okay, I need to come up with like where these werewolves came from. So I kind of like, okay, let me go to the side, put this writing aside. Let me just start kind of coming up with that, like based on the stuff I knew, based on some stories that I'd read. So I was doing that as well. And that was super fun. I love doing stuff like that.
So for your world and your heroes, is it, because you said you're very like inspired by like a bunch of Marvel, some DC stuff and all of that. Is there like multiple, when your first book starts, there are already heroes existing?
Yes. So when my world starts, when the book starts, superhumans have been in existence, at least been in known existence for over 40 plus years. So it's ingrained, it's baked into society at this point. They've been around since the early 70s. So that changes a lot of things as to how certain history things will go. Even though superhumans take up a small fraction of society, but there's still a couple million superhumans around and growing. And so that led to different iterations. You had the golden age of Superman heroes. And it's interesting because I put it where it's like, okay, you have one hero who was kind of like the quote superhero. He was the first like superhero. And he was almost like the golden age Superman, but he could fly and he was a little stronger. And then there's a character named Titan, and he's basically kind of like the Silver Age Superman. He's like a mixture of the Silver Age Superman meets the John Byrne Superman.
Okay.
So like right before Crisis and then post Crisis, he's kind of like the middle ground, but he's like the guy. He's the Superman. He's like the most popular hero in the world. He's like Michael Jordan of superheroes. And then you have our guy who's, kind of like, as he starts to kind of get notoriety, he takes up that mantle, if you will.
So the previous heroes are kind of like the legendary people that are spoken of. They were the starters. And
also what I did is, just one thing I did, and I kind of expounded on it more in book 5 than I did in other books. I hinted at it here and there in the other books, but I expounded on it more in book 5, is that they're like, depending on the state, there's states that have their own superhero teams. So they have their own heroes, because it's like, the Avengers of the world, they can't be everywhere.
Yeah.
They can't go everywhere. It's like, or else, they'd miss a lot of shit and then they'd be blamed. So each, like, you have certain cities like in LA, New York, Boston, they'll have superhero teams. Like LA has like 5 superhero teams because LA is kind of big. Yeah, there's one team that I made that's called the Battalion, and they're essentially, here's the funny thing about them. They were basically started off as TV actors. They were basically on a show that was a loose adaptation of the Vanguard. Until there was an event, there was like a fan signing event where there was like some explosion or a collapse or something, and they sprang into action and they saved so many lives. It's like, there's something here. Maybe we should do something about it. So they became real superheroes. They trained and they became real superheroes. And the people, of course, I just want to be an actor, they got the boot. And and then there was one character who basically, he's played 2 versions of himself. He played one version that was kind of like a loose adaptation of Titan, who's kind of the Superman of the world. And then he played that character's alternate universe duplicates named Hyperion. But yeah, stuff like that's fun because you're just having fun with the world and just also showing people's reactions to it. And I think that's one of the important things is I love having the character, one of the main characters, be around humans to ground them, because it's fun like when you always show them around superhumans all the time, then it's not that super anymore. It's kind of like this is your normal. So it's important to show them around like normal people, because then it kind of keeps, hey, this is super, this is important. And it also grounds them too, because if you're just super, it's like you're gonna soon become like the people in The Boys, sociopaths, removed from society and out of touch.
Yes. I like that. So how do you keep track of all of your characters and world? Do you have like a giant document that you have with
I have a good memory. That's the thing. It's crazy. I have a really, really good memory. So it's actually kind of like, oh, okay, that's happening here, that's happening here. Now I will say this, with like my older series, there is some stuff I'm gonna have to go back and like reread, like, oh wait, what happened? He's like, what happened here? Because I've been so focused on Pantheon for like the past like couple of years that I kind of like pushed that to the wayside for right now. But Pantheon, I remember pretty much almost everything that's been happening.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's super fun. It's and it's because I like it so much. It's such a fun world to play around in. Even here's the thing, even arguments can be fun here. Like fights are good, but I love writing arguments better, because it's just the back and forth and whatnot. Because sometimes with the fights, sometimes it's a bit of a struggle to keep the fight interesting, keep it compelling. It's not just like rock'em sock'em robots. You have to also, what's the emotional investment of the combatants, particularly the one whose POV it is. And that's key to focus on. And you also just make sure that the words and the synonyms you use are not the same. Like, how many times can you use punch or thrash or elbow? It's just like, you have to be so mindful of that. Whereas when it comes to an argument, other than maybe some facial reactions or emotional reactions, you're just having people sling insults at each other sometimes. You're just having people just like literally thrash each other verbally. And that's so much fun. Like, I wrote this one short story that was like the dissolution of two best friends' friendship. And oh my God, I loved it so much,
Oh, yes.
And then even there was this one fight in book 2 where there actually was a fight, and the fight was fun to watch. But I just remembered writing the argument before the fight, and God, it was so good. It was so much fun, because it's just, even reading it back, I was reading it back, and not to high five myself too much, but I was just kind of like, ooh, oh, I wrote that. That was really good, because I was getting so into it. I was like, oh wow, I wrote that, really? And it was just such an engrossing interview, because I put it like this, with that interview, without giving too much context away, it was, okay, a lot of people were disappointed by Revenge of the Sith, particularly how quickly Anakin turned to the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, okay, it happened because it's like it was supposed to happen, not because, oh, here's the natural progression as to this is the path and this is the only path he could come onto. So with that in mind, that's what I went into writing that scene. And I made sure that there are all these reasons as to why he would go that way and why he was now diametrically opposed to his former mentor. And it just worked on every single level. And he had every reason to be pissed, and it was great. So good, just visceral, emotional, heartbroken, gut-wrenching, this split. It's just like, what do? You got to fight. Someone's going down.
Yeah. And I mean, some people say it's like I guess, well, some people will say it's like a cliche to have that kind of relationship, but like, you see it so much in like normal life. Like,
yes.
Imagine like parents that you've lived under your parents for so long, and finally you're allowed to be your own person, and what you want to do doesn't line up with the way they raised you. So you're like, well, we're having it out now, because, and then like, it's devastating for like the parent or the mentor. And like in fiction, it's the same thing. Like the Obi-Wan is going to be like, no, I told you everything that you need to do, but there's just no.
And here's another thing too, about adding to that. What if the mentor failed in some way?
Oh yeah, because and that adds a lot of drama too, and a lot of realism, because no one is going to raise or teach 100% correct. Like, there's going to be moments where it's like, oh, you're the teacher, but you're also just as vulnerable, and like, you don't have everything figured out either. So
and how and maybe the ways they screwed up, and how there's a ripple effect. There's just this butterfly effect that affects everything, and this has brought them to this point.
And I also like hearing the arguments, because it gives your characters a chance to show how well they know each other, and what specific things they've been holding back and like festering on, because they've just been waiting for that moment to be like, oh, really?
Yeah, or just sometimes they weren't planning on doing it, but it just happens. Like, something about it just triggers them to say that. Like, even there was another argument. There's all these arguments in my series. And there's this argument where two best friends, and they're fine, but two best friends, basically, one of them was worried about another friend. And so then it just started, the conversation just escalated into something kind of ugly. And then they started saying things that they knew would hurt the other person. Yeah, just to kind of get at them, and just to be like, well, you said that, well, what about this? And then they get interrupted by a superhero fight. As you do. But it just makes it so much more real and grounded. And it's just like, yes, all types of good.
I love all that.
Stuff. Wonderful.
So let me ask you this. This one's probably a hard question because without going into spoilers or anything, is there a plot thread that you have written or a twist or something that is particularly your favorite or one that surprised you when it came to you?
There are so many. There's definitely a couple. I don't want to say too much because, just basically it will give away the horse. But what I will say is one of my favorite plot threads or plot twists, it had to do with a character who, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in terms of plotting and pantsing, where it goes back to a character who was supposed to be just a very minor character in the overall scheme of things. They're supposed to have a scene with one of the main characters. And as I was writing the scene, I hadn't written the scene down. I was writing it in my head. I was kind of gathering together in my head as you do. As you know, it's like, you're going to do a chapter. Your brain starts coming up with stuff, churning. And so I was coming up with the scene and I was just like, oh, we need to do more with this new character. I didn't expect them to be this important or them to have this much chemistry with this character, but there needs to be more done with this character. So it's like I started kind of developing the character more, giving them more meat to do, giving them more interactions with this other character. And that was probably one of my favorites. I love that so much. That's the best type of pantsing, is when you have a plot and then something changes because of that. So
yeah, the little side characters that you thought were just side characters,
and then they decide to just curb stomp the world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like the writing process is it's such it's a end product for the reader, but it's like it doesn't come to you always in order, or you don't start at page 1 sometimes and just go to the end. It's like you meditate on, like you said, some scenes. For me, it's like I know that I want to write a certain scene. It's like you get little snippets of conversation while you're going about your normal day, and it won't leave you alone until you finally are like, okay, now we're going to sit down and see where this goes. And it does go. You never know everything when you first sit down to put it on the page.
No, you never do. And that's also the fun part too, is that a lot of times what I'll do is I'll know what I want to do, and then a lot of times I'll write the dialogue first, because the dialogue helps guide where we're going to go with the chapter. And so that also informs, and that can change once you start putting in kind of the more exposition parts. But I go with the dialogue. I don't know exactly what I'm going to say. There are times, and this is something I love doing, I will sometimes go through YouTube comments that make me laugh. And I'll use some tweaked version of them because it's just like, oh, that was great. Oh, I love that so much. It just made me laugh so hard. I'm like, if that amuses me, I got to put it in. One of them was, there was this one character who is the best friend of one of the superhumans. And they're talking about girls. And it's funny, it's because you have these teenage boys who are talking about girls. And sometimes it gets a little edgy, because it's like, these are kids, it's just like, they're going to talk, they're going to be irreverent when it talks to this, especially when they're, in each other's company. And the idea for that back and forth came from watching Superbad. The first scene in the movie where they're just walking home and they're kind of being real crass, just talking. I was like, oh, this is what this is, this back and forth. And so the character is kind of the main character is just like, dude, yeah, this girl's really hot. And he's just like, no, she's not. His friend's like, no, she's not. And he's like, dude, really, come on. And he's just like, and the best friend is just kind of like, well, yeah, okay, I'll admit she's not a burn victim. And I was just like, Jesus Christ. And I heard that from a friend of mine when we were talking about a show. There's a popular sci-fi show. He wasn't impressed by the lead actress. And he said that, and he said it with a deadpan straight face, like, she's not a burn victim. I was just like, I can't believe you just said that. But I had to use that because it was brilliant. This is the same guy who did the Batman rant, by the way. He's just full of witticisms. He's great.
Yeah, this is gold. This is going in the memory right now.
honestly, that's what I do for a lot of my conversations in the books, is that I just listen to people. I see a comment that makes me laugh, or I see kind of a diatribe, and it's just like, you just kind of like, okay, what parts can I, obviously you don't want to use the whole thing verbatim, but it's just like, what parts can I kind of mine to kind of use that? Because some of these quotes and one-liners are just, they can just diffuse a bomb, or they can just be great kind of tension breakers right in the, like, for instance, and I think this one I came up with myself. I was writing a thing where, they're fighting this monster, and he's just like, it's like, they ask like, what do you want? And he's just like, to feed, as evil does. And then the character's just like, and mind you, this character is kind of, since, it's a Wendigo, eats people. So he's kind of like, couldn't just go to an In-N-Out. And then he just gets glared at by the person beside him. He's just like, I know it's not my best. Okay, it's not my best. And just having fun with that, and just kind of really making sure it fits your characters. That type of stuff.
Yeah, the sarcasm. I mean, sometimes in some stories it can be overdone, but you definitely can't eliminate it completely, because even in real life, it's like somebody asks you to do a favor, and you're like, oh geez, really, again? Like, the 5th time I go to McDonald's for you. Like,
yeah, you have fun with it. Or even just like, particularly when you're dealing with kids, you have them, you don't want to completely just use too much colloquialisms, because you want to make sure that the book is still timeless.
Yes.
But at the same time, you definitely use a little bit. You use a little bit. Like, I had this faction of mean girls who, they're terrible. And what I call them is, they call themselves the Sensational Six. Kind of a play on. And here's how I did that, is that's actually a play on. So the Vanguard has had a lot of different iterations and roster types. So there was a roster type that was like, it was like the most popular roster, and they were called the Sensational Seven.
Okay.
Kind of like how, with Justice League, the main 7, that everyone knows, it's like, Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, Aquaman, Green Lantern, Flash, and then depending on which version, either Martian Manhunter or Cyborg. And how interesting that they're a number 6. Ooh, a perfect number. So, and of course, behind their back, some people call them the Sinister Six. So,
yeah.
So having a little fun, having some homage. So
that's cool. I love I love how it's like, I mean, in general, people look for their group. So it's like, it makes sense that, with superpowers, it's like, it makes it even more of an elite. You're not one of our perfect.
Well, they're actually
even more so.
They're actually not superhumans, at least that we know.
These ones are not.
Yeah, but it's just kind of like high school mean girls, who, this is like, they're just dealing with, and this is some of the world that the teen superhuman has to deal with, is these girls, this kind of world, and jocks and popularity and just angst and girls and all that stuff, and just being a good friend to his friends. So these are the type of things that he's dealing with in this world. And I think it's key. It's universal. And I was a huge fan of like these teen shows. So, and this is another thing too. And God, all the people who are my inspirations are all problematic now. So another person who was an inspiration in some ways, Joss Whedon, who apparently is the worst now. I guess he's the worst. There's this one thing that he said that said, always make sure to fill your tank. And I think that's such a key thing. And obviously we're writing superhero fiction, and we love it, and we know a lot of the landscape. But he also said it doesn't matter what genre it is. And I think that's also a key thing too, is that inspiration can come from anywhere, and it can come from any genre. So it's okay. You don't have to watch all superhero fiction shows or comic book movies or whatnot. It's like, there's stuff like, for instance, a big inspiration for my book came from Veronica Mars when she was a teenager. Yeah, you remember that show?
Oh yeah.
And then also season 1, because that was the only good season, really. Season 1 of the OC. There's some of that stuff there.
You know, to this day,
Mhm.
as a like 30-something adult,
Mhm.
I have a ring of friends, and
Mhm.
our guilty pleasure is watching the like really cheesy like CW high
Yes.
school drama shows because
Yes.
it doesn't get old. And
No, it doesn't. It
it's
doesn't.
like, and we all get invested in them. We like sit back and we're like, the drama, like the plight of these kids, it like once they get out of their school, it's going to be meaningless to them. But like
Exactly.
for a couple of years, it's like the end of the world.
It's their
Because
bubble. It's a bubble.
yeah,
It's their whole entire existence. And that's one of the things I wanted to show, where the character who's in high school, initially high school is like be all, end all, be all.
mm-hmm.
But it's like what ended up happening is that once they started kind of having their alter ego, they're just like, this is fucking meaningless. Or my friends, it's just like, this is meaningless, you know? This is just, it is what it is. And obviously it's easy for him to say that. And you see also another thing I want to show is you see the growing disconnect between him and a lot of his friends who don't know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a key thing to do as well. It's like, what are some of the psychological effects? You know, and also what type of hero does he want to be? Even if he's gaining traction, does he want to be Disneyfied? Does he want to become a cartoon character?
Yeah,
Does he want
a
to
corporate sponsor?
Yeah, does he want to, you know, have so many have so many T-shirts of himself? You hit him and he explodes like Fruity Pebbles, like John Cena. No, do you want that? And now, by the way, that's another inspiration for certain characters is pro wrestling, because to a degree, some of these people are kind of like superheroes. So yeah, I think it's like inspiration. Going back to that, inspiration comes from anywhere, like these shows, like these teen shows. The mystery aspect that came from Veronica Mars. Some of the angst came from also Veronica Mars, but also the OC and a little bit of Vampire Diaries. And one thing I also did as well, yes, when that show was good for the first 3 seasons, and then it kind of dropped off. But then another key thing is, what was the thing? For the main location of the universe, one thing I wanted to do is I wanted it to be not just some weird fictional city that had city at the end of it. I wanted it to be like based on a real place, or kind of like a futuristic alternate universe version of a place. So the main location, there are other locations they go to, but the very main location is a city called San Miguel. Now, it's specifically based on what if there was an earthquake that leveled San Luis Obispo County in California, and then it was rebuilt by early 90s into this new megapolis functional megapolis called San Miguel. And there actually is a unincorporated community called San Miguel in San Luis Obispo County. But what if they just renamed the big city that? And it has suburbs and everything, but it still has a lot of familiar stuff and restaurants that San Luis Obispo had. There's still a Hearst Castle. There's still Jamba Juice is there. That's the main thing. I haven't really mentioned it too much there, but it will be there. Excuse me. And so just kind of having that there, it kind of gave the world a little more kind of grounded, like realistic vibe. And I kind of just made it like an interesting fusion of, it's like LA, a little bit like LA, some like San Fran, and a little bit of, you know, Chicago and New York kind of put into how it actually operates, but specifically more so like LA. And it makes sense because this is also now the nexus of where a lot of superhumans live and where superheroes come to.
Okay, yeah. I like that approach.
Yeah, and in book 5, actually, I took a real city and I kind of souped it up a bit. But what I did is that, okay, what would happen if the hero who was a patron of that city disgraced himself? What happens to that city? And so that's what in book 5, I kind of showed this city that was kind of like a cracked mirror image of San Miguel that used to be kind of like what San Miguel was until their hero broke bad, which wasn't intentional, but he was brainwashed and he broke bad. And so then he went into exile. It's like, everything that was booming about that city, they had to disavow him. And it really screwed the city's economy up. It plummeted their economy, plunged them into all types of debt. So showing that was actually kind of interesting as well.
That is a side, like, it seems like it's a lot of things plucked from like relevant modern issues that we've never really dealt with until the internet age. It's like, that's like superhero cancel culture, right?
Exactly.
And it's like, if you built your whole infrastructure around that one hero, you either have to replace them with somebody just as good, or it all goes away.
or what if a certain city becomes a model for, hey, look at what superheroes are done. Look at the damage they've done. Maybe we shouldn't have them. And that's kind of a staging ground for maybe a broader model, a broader radius of getting this out there. So that could be a problem.
Yeah.
And that's part of the world. And this is all stuff that's part of this world, is adding some realistic elements, but again, having the superhero stuff, showing these different people. And also, here's another thing, making sure their names are good.
Yes.
There's some people, oh my God, there's some things I've read, and this is not to pick, but just like there sometimes when it's like, if we're going to take them seriously as superheroes, like, give them a good name. I know,
because it's going to be their brand, and even as a regular, like, real life human being, like, everything you do, you kind of look at it like, okay, this is going to be like out there forever. Like, and especially if you're a superhero in one of these books, I mean, you'd be like, this is going to be my calling card. Like, there's no going back.
The funny thing is, I actually kind of made fun of the bad names. And the first book, I have this and this was another fun scene I got to write, was having fun with the names. And then, of course, having fun with what if you haven't chosen a name yet. And what made it even more fun was that the whole thing is like, oh, well, you can't go out there with a crap name because it will stick with you forever. It's like the alias will stick with you forever. But it's better than having no name. So, and kind of like little rules and whatnot, like people make fun of capes. It's like, capes, really? Who still wears a cape?
Yeah. Cosplays.
Yeah. So.
Did you ever watch that the Robot Chicken DC sketch where they made fun of like the villain names, but they had a bunch of characters all come storming in thinking that they were the first ones on the scene. It's like, it's me, Victor Freeze. And they'd be like, oh, really? Another guy that uses the word freeze spelled differently with ice powers?
Oh my God. Yeah, like, have fun. Yeah, go on. So what are you going to say?
Because they basically are like, did you research this? How many more of you can there be? And it ends up being like 5 or 6 different characters before they're like, we're done. We're walking out now. It's all over.
That's awesome. And like, even for instance, like having a name, like there's a cryokinetic in my series, and his name is December. Simple. Okay. Yeah, it's not a name that you hear used too often when it comes to a cryokinetic, but it makes sense. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense if you're in Australia or parts of South America, but it makes sense in North America because then it would be summer in December. But yeah, it just having fun with it. Like, even there's this another character, I called them LA, like La Noire, and they're on an LA based team, so you could call her LA Noire.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah, and she's a very minor character, but it just kind of thought to myself, I'm like, ooh, that'd be kind of cool. So
in your, this is one question that was not on my list of things, but like, in your world, are there superheroes that you don't know who they are? Like, is there a culture where it's like they have their hero identity and that's it, and then when they go home or leave the spotlight, like, you just don't know who they are?
There's several like that. Like, it's a combination where there are definitely heroes who are out and proud with their public characters, but you have many who you don't know who they are when they take the mask off. And they prefer it that way. We, like, for instance, the person who's kind of the lady, the person who is the Batman pastiche, we don't know who he is. But yeah, we don't know who he is with the mask off. The same with a lot of characters where we don't know. We have no idea who they are. And I think a lot of them prefer that anonymity. Now, the extreme teens, everyone knows because, again, they're like Kardashians, but heroes. So, yeah, everyone knows who they are. They post everything. They have a reality show. They also have a 3D. They have 3D mission experience movies. So every cheesy thing you can think of, they go there.
And they're all things that I would probably buy right away.
Yeah, so it's just like you're just having fun with them. And of course, certain characters will be in showmances.
Oh, yeah. Hey, well, you got to do what you got to do to stay relevant in the public eye, I suppose.
Like the Speedster, he's in a showmance with a huge K-pop star. And she needed him to cross over into the States.
Okay.
Because and it was funny because I was talking to a friend of mine who's she's Hong Kong Chinese. And so I was asking her, like, hey, like, which of these like Asian pop genres would have the best crossover into the States? And she said, oh yeah, K-pop. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. We'll use that. And that also created a great instance where the best friend of the Pacific Islander, who's Korean, he does not like this K-pop star.
Yeah. Oh,
he thinks she's a sellout. He thinks she sucks. He's like, she still sucks. I don't care if she's Korean.
But the money.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, her background story, I got the idea for her background story while I was in Greece. I know that's weird, but what happened was there's a singer in Greece called like Kailomira, and she is like, I think the best way to describe her, she's like the Britney Spears / Katy Perry of Greece. I can't think of anyone else who's huge right now other than Taylor Swift, but their music styles are different, so that's not Taylor Swift, but Britney Spears / Katy Perry. And the interesting thing about her is that she's actually first generation American. Her parents are Greek, and she was from she lived in like East Coast. But what happened was that I guess she entered this kind of like America's Got Talent, American Idol, but in Greece thing. She went back to Greece, entered it, killed it. And then she like became a huge pop star over in Greece. Oh, wow. And so I thought to myself, well, what if I kind of did that with this K-pop star? Just kind of a nice little backstory for that. Like, this is where she came from, But she became big in Asia, but she still needed that crossover. So what better than to date a speedster who's like one of the most popular heroes on Earth and in America? Them being seen together would be huge for her career. And it was. She became a big deal.
Then how does it negatively affect?
It's like I'm prophetic because it's like I did that to her, and it's like now K-pop is starting to become a big deal over here. You're starting to see like BTS and some of these other people are becoming BTS, Blackpink, those people. So yeah, like those groups are becoming big. So I'm just like, it's not coming.
But organically, it organically works its way in. Like,
yeah. It's not the biggest thing. It's not the biggest story, but it's kind of like a nice little wrinkle. It's a nice little additive to this world. It makes it a lot more richer, much more real. So obviously the focus is on the superheroes and whatnot, but you have this stuff going on in the background. So it shows like, hey, the world is not stopping because this guy is doing this. There's still other things going on in the background. Yeah.
Yes. I like that. I like that. Yeah. Because it's like the world parts is the stuff that it fuels all of your like theories and
yes, it does. I love, and that's World building is my favorite. It's one of my favorite things to do is to do world building, especially in a superhero fiction. It's like, come on. It's like candy. It's like sugar candy.
Oh,
So,
yes.
yeah.
I love prowling the forums and like seeing people's elaborate guesses of like what's going to happen next based on this, that, and these. And they mentioned this. Maybe this is going to be a reference to this character. And I'm like, oh, even if it's not true, I just enjoyed reading all of this person's infatuation with this one thing that I follow.
That's great. So I got a question for you. It's interesting. I wanted to ask you a question.
Okay.
Why do you feel the niche is so small for what we do?
Coming from a reader's perspective, because I knew about superhero fiction like back when they had the novelization of Death of Superman, because I ended up buying it from my local library. It was on the stack of books that was being sold out because they just had too many copies. And I was like, I'll buy it. But I think part of it is it's not visual. Like, because I studied media in college.
Okay.
And there's two types of media. There's hot media and cold media, and the way that our imaginations process them is different. Because, like, when you watch a show, it's visual, or read a comic, it's like visually, you're getting most of your information from images that are already created for your brain. So you don't have to like exercise that part of yourself. You just process the conversations, and then, but like reading a book requires like a lot more mental processing to see in your head what your eyes are reading, basically. So I don't know if it's just it's more effort to get into, and your prerequisite is you have to be a reader of books as well as a fan of superheroes. And there are some people that will only read the comics, and they are not book readers. Like, I have friends that are like, they'll read manga for days, but then you give them an actual like novel and they're like, I will never even get that. I will not open this. So I wonder if that is something to do with it. But I've always been a book reader, and like comics as well. But I've always been like, here you go. It was like when I was really little, here's a chapter book.
Yeah.
We're gonna
and you know what though? I think that hold on real quick, I'm gonna sneeze. Hold on real quick. Sorry. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think for me, one of the things I actually, in terms of people I cater this to, is let's say you have people who enjoyed the MCU. Like comic readers, of course, but also people who enjoy the MCU, because some of them are not going to get into comic books. It's just the case. Like, they're casual-ish movie watchers. They like it. They're entertained by the popcorn, but they're not going to go into comic books. And also, where would they start? I mean, there have been so many reboots, so many restarts, so many cancel this one, start here. It's like, it's a mess. So I cater it towards them. And that's one of the reasons why I try to add the more realistic elements. Yeah. That
ties into one of my I guess one of my questions. Because your series is only one solid series at the moment.
At the moment.
But I'd say, because one of my questions is for people that have like multi-series going on, it's like where do you suggest your readers begin if there's multiple entry points? Do they start at the very, very beginning, or?
Well, I'd say for people who want to start in my series, I'd say definitely start at Age of Heroes. Age of Heroes is book 1 in the series. So that would be the place to start for the Pantheon Saga. Yeah, definitely the place to start.
I'm a big, it sounds stupid, but I'm a fan of having everything numbered and being like, I know for sure I need to read this one first.
Oh, no, that's fine. These books are numbered. Just the thing. These books are definitely numbered. So if you go on Amazon, you'll see that. And And right now it's in 3 formats right now. So it's in Audible, ebook, and print for the first 3. Books 1 through 5 is just Audible and ebook. Actually, no, it's ebook and paperback. There will be Audible for books 4 through 5. They're coming. The pandemic, of course, kind of slowed everything down.
Yes.
But yeah, start with Age of Heroes. That's the place to go.
I said the poor audiobook readers. It's been like the onslaught of like, we all want stuff to read and listen to if you love Audible. Like, I love Audible. But it's like the poor authors at the same time are like all stuck at home. So what are you going to do? Easiest thing to do, get your audiobook going. And it's like now the backlog has hit Audible. So,
Yeah. And for my audiobook publisher, that's the problem, is that there's a backlog, especially because unlike a lot of other audiobooks, my audiobook actually has multiple narrators, and it kind of needed to.
Cool.
Because since they're different POVs, one of them's a female, it has multiple narrators, and that's probably part of the big reason why it's been backed up because of this. So, yeah.
For people listening, they will come. They will arrive eventually. Don't worry.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I've gotten a lot of fans who are just like, "Where's book 4 coming out? Where's book 4 coming out?" I was like, I don't know, dude.
Yeah.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, you don't really have control over it.
No, I don't. No. Yeah.
It's like the illusion that we have control over everything as Amazon published people. It's like sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So.
Yeah, especially when it's an audiobook and it's an audio publisher, you have so much less control.
Mm-hmm.
But I say this, if there are writers watching, definitely consider investing in audio, because audio has grown by leaps and bounds. Like, I know authors, and it depends on the genre, but I know authors who are making more in audio than they are ebook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'd say definitely invest in it. It's worth your investment. Because many people nowadays, not just that they're staying home and listening, but so many people, when they're driving home, when they're going on a subway and whatnot, they are listening to audiobooks, and it's such a burgeoning. It's still, I don't think it's reached its potentially at its peak. So I definitely would say, if I understand, like, when you're trying to do it yourself, it's kind of a little daunting price wise. Then maybe look at an audiobook publisher. Look one that's friendly, more genre friendly, like a Tantor, like an Audible Studios, like a Podium, and submit, see if you can get it in there, and if it fits, then great, because then you won't really have to worry about paying for anything. And also, but if you are doing something on your own, if you're looking for a narrator, you definitely need to make sure that the narrator has a following. Because narrators, a lot of these narrators, the bigger narrators, like the Ray Porters, Luke Daniels, R.C. Bray's, like an Institution and Sci-Fi, like, people will read their books not because of you. Sometimes they'll read it because of that narrator, because they're such a big fan, and
they click on the name, they click on the audio, the reader's name, and they'll be like, "What else has this person done?" Oh, yes.
Exactly. And so that's kind of, I think that's super important, is to having that in mind as well when it comes to audio. First, you got to get the book done. But I think when it comes to audio, again, look at the factors in terms of what will make your book successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see, what do I got? I got a couple.
You have some comments?
I got a couple questions left for you.
Sweet.
I'm trying to figure out which ones some of them we've answered. So I'm like, nope, that one I've already done. Before I even start saying it, I've already. Basically, I mean, you said your series has much more coming.
Oh yeah.
Do you have? This is like a 2-part question. When can readers hopefully expect another book, and are there any hints you can give them of what they might see?
I'd say for the next book, the aim is to get one out later this year, hopefully before the end of the year. I do plan to get a novella done, and I'd like to get it out maybe in early fall, right before fall starts. There's still a couple little logistics I need to work out with that, but that is the plan for that novella. But the book 6 will definitely come out in this year. That's the plan. And in terms of what I can say, read book 5. The breadcrumbs are there as to where it will lead in book 6. So you'll wait and see. It's coming though.
If you're like me, get your highlighter out, or if it's on your Kindle, drag the text boxes and start typing theory notes.
Exactly.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. I said that's one thing I've mentioned it before with other people I've interviewed, but I love the speculating, and I like, because it's something that some authors like J.K. Rowling for years had me on the hook.
Yeah, she had a lot.
I would read every interview she did just to see if somebody would be like, "Will we ever see more of Sirius Black?" And then she would be like, "Perhaps in my next book you'll see." And I'd be like, "Oh boy, now I'm going to go back and read everything related to Sirius Black just to see if I could figure out anything."
Yeah,
I'm such a fan of looking forward to the future. It's like, and especially with superhero stuff, it's like it's built to be like episodic and ongoing.
It is, and that's the thing I like about it. It's episodic, it's epic, and you have fun with it, and you stretch it out, and you have the drama. You add like, okay, here's the thing next. What are the threads that are pulling you in to that next area? Because happy endings are nice, but if you're in a series, you have to bring them back. Bring them back to the boat. How are you going to bring them back? Yes. Resolve the main threads, of course, in that book, but what's going to keep them coming back?
Yeah, that's why in all those MCU movies they have the little end credit teaser.
It was just smart, super smart, And like for the novella that I'm doing, I actually have this end credit thing that I'm going to do there too, where everything's fine. There was definitely some loss, but now what else are you going to do? Now that you have this like super teaser, it's just like, oh shit. Gotta bring them back.
Love it.
Yeah. So
I really my last question is just a wrap-up question. So do you have anything else that you want to say before I close it all down?
I'd say if you guys like solid quality superhero fiction, check out the Pantheon Saga. Starts with Age of Heroes. You can find me on Amazon exclusively, or you can find my website. It's ccekeke.com, or you can find me on Instagram at ccekeke, and you can find me on Facebook as well. I have a Facebook fan page. But I think you'll enjoy it. Yes. Those who are superhero fans.
Yes, and it is. I will say, for the listeners out there, it's going to be a heck of a long time until we have more Marvel and even DC stuff.
Yes.
So you're looking to fill the void.
In the meantime, in between time, do it.
Go get the Pantheon books because and the good thing about digital is you can carry them all in your pocket all at the same time.
Yeah, you can carry them around in your pocket, bite-sized.
Weighs nothing, so you have no excuse.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for being on, because it has been a blast to chat with you.
Likewise. It's been fun. It's been super fun. Thanks for having me, Franklin.
You are very welcome. So for all the listeners out there, I will do my little wrap-up spiel. Just want to remind you all out there in the world, if you like the content that you've heard in this podcast, whether it's on YouTube or wherever you download your podcast, iTunes, Podbean, and all that jazz, please don't forget to subscribe to the show. You don't want to miss out on new episodes because they come out pretty much so far every Friday. Give us a like. Make sure you turn notifications on and leave us some comments down below if you are able. If you discuss the books that we talked about, I know this episode we've been very careful not to do spoilers. So if you chat about any of the books that we mentioned, leave a spoiler tag somewhere, a warning, so we can just scroll by. It would be very much appreciated. And as always, everybody listening, just want to thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you all, whether you're new or old to the podcast, and I will see you all next time.